Hi guys, Alec, Peirce, vintage scuba, yeah, old stuff. If you're an old diver, you'll really enjoy this. If you're a new diver, you'll really enjoy this too, hopefully anyway. We have an awful lot of brand spanking new divers, or young divers anyway, who are really into vintage scuba. They like diving with double hose rags, they like to hear about the old stuff where the sport came from, and that's what I'm here for. Okay, all right. So we have talked about double hose regulators, and of course every diver in the world knows about double hose regulators, the old-fashioned bubbly hoses and so on that we all wore years and years. Well, we didn't all wear, but we did for a long time. I was trained on a double hose regulator in 1960 and used one for several years before I bought my first single hose regulator. My instructor, who was an ex-Navy diver, he actually said to the class, if you guys buy one of those one hose regulators, I'll take away your certification card. Don't do that, they'll kill you. Yeah, he did. That's what he said. But anyway, the double hose regulator is long gone. The last few years, probably ending about 1975, they've been gone since then. Just to give you an idea, 1975 is 45 years ago. They've been gone a long time. Still in use though. Lots of my friends and lots of the vintage divers, our sea hunt divers, you've seen my sea hunt playlist. Our sea hunt divers, this is what we use, the old two hose regulators, and they're pretty neat. This particular regulator, a little bit odd, very heavy. I would guess, and I'm pretty good at this, I bet you that weighs about 6 pounds. Yeah, you don't need as much weight if you're diving with a two hose regulator. That's not true, but with this one you would. And that's because the body is cast bronze. It was actually sand cast. The earliest ones were sand cast, where they make the shape, and it's actually cast in sand, baked, and then the bronze is poured into that sand cast mold. And when they break off the sand later, they end up with this. Now that may be part of the reason why the finish on this has got this rather very attractive bronzy look. It's bronze, yeah, and but very slightly pebbly surface or a matte surface. It's more than matte. It's almost like it was been sandblasted. That's the reason for that. And it's a beautiful regulator. It's designed. This was first made in 1954. A company in L.A. They had Los Angeles. They had a couple of different names, Garrett and Air Search and so on, a couple of different names. And somebody in there anyway developed this as a scuba regulator. The sport of scuba diving was just starting to become popular. And so they decided, hey, we can build one of those. And they came up with this Air-Lung. It's called the Northill Air-Lung. After a couple of years, the company name changed to Northill, so they called it the Northill Air-Lung. You can see it on the front there, very simple. That's a great name, Air-Lung. Often, you may recall some of my earlier vintage videos, I mentioned that the first divers were called skin divers. And that became a little bit confusing because snorkelers were called skin divers too sometimes. So different words were used to describe divers using tanks and regulators. You see, we hadn't invented the word scuba yet. Yeah, there was no scuba. So some of the early divers were called lung divers. Yeah, lung divers, to differentiate them from skin divers or snorkelers. But anyway, so that Air-Lung was a pretty good name. It would probably caught on. And this regulator was very, very popular, or perhaps I should say more accurately, very desirable. This was kind of like the elite of the regulators of the day. In those days, you could buy a decent regulator for about $35. Yeah. I think dust caps are $35 now, aren't they? But anyway, you could buy a regulator for $35. Now regulators are, $300 to $800. This would be an $800 regulator today, maybe more. So if a regulator in those days was, let's say, $35, this regulator would be $60. Now I know you're out there, you're saying, well, $60, why wouldn't you buy the best? Well, because in those days, when you were only making $25 a week, you didn't just throw away $35 or $20. You didn't, and that's exactly the way it was back then. Houses were $5,000. Yeah, done. $5,000 in LA. You want to buy a house in Long Beach? $5,000. Yeah. Now they're $2 million. But anyway, it's a long story. But this regulator was the best. A little more expensive than most, but it had a lot of great features. First of all, it was solid bronze, cast solid bronze, all one-piece body, one-piece cap, and then a separate, actually the yoke, and it's kind of interesting because I'm going to turn this a bit. I'll try to do this slowly so you don't miss it. It actually had a reserve valve on it, built-in reserve. Reserve was a big deal in those days too. Remember, when this came out in 54, 55, 56, 57, those years, there was no J valve. Yeah, they didn't have J valves on tanks. Or when the J valves first came out in those years, they were too expensive. Yeah, they were $12 more than a K valve, just a standard valve with no reserve on it. So, no, it ain't that. And but people pretty soon caught on to the fact that having a reserve was a good idea. So many regulators came up with a built-in reserve, but this is one of them. Many other ones did as well. We're going to look at some of those. And this was kind of a neat reserve on. I'm just going to show you some of the features, okay? It has a dust cap. And when you take off the dust cap to mount the regulator on the tank, it's on this really strong cord. It's actually fastened to the reserve lever with a metal clip, and it's fastened to the dust cap with a metal clip. They weren't worried about losing the dust cap. It was worth in those days 1.5 cents. But this cord became your reserve cord. You could reach back and pull it and activate the reserve, just like that. So this was a dual-purpose cord. There was no J rod as they had later, a metal rod that went down the tank. Anyway, that's kind of a small, interesting feature. Now, the front of this was nice as well. It was all that sand cast bronze color with a beautiful, and this is a very nice model. This one is almost new. It's a beautiful jet black, shiny label. Can you see how nice that label is on there, Kevin? Riveted right to that cover. And the whole mechanism was neat. Now, they used to, I've never done this, but they used to say that the Northill Air-Lung was a special regulator, very easy breathing and top quality, and you can disassemble and reassemble this entire regulator with a one flat screwdriver. Not today. No, today regulators, you're looking at a couple $100 worth of specialized tools that you can't buy at your local Home Depot or Harbor Freight. This apparently anyway, you could disassemble this and put it back together with one single flat screwdriver. Pretty neat idea. I've not done it, but it looks like it might be possible. These are standard stainless steel screws in there. So what else was neat about it? Well, the hoses were pretty neat as well. The hoses were a little heavier than the hoses that U.S. Divers and Boyd and other companies had at the day. And these hoses also were attached. I don't know if you can get in there closer there, Kevin, and see right here. The clip. Unlike using Tinnerman clips, we're going to talk about Tinnerman clamps, Tinnerman clips on another episode, or the plastic ones or anything else. These were actually a stainless steel metal band that went around and crimped together very, very tightly. So there was no chance of these hoses coming off. So they were unique. They were used on both the first stage and on the main body and on the mouthpiece as well. Very interesting and unique to Northill Air-Lung, these stainless steel metal clamps. What else was neat? Well, there was one more neat feature about this regulator that I want to share with you. This was years and years ahead of its time. The mouthpiece. Now, the mouthpiece looks pretty normal. It's extra wide, built for Kevin. But it's a pretty neat mouthpiece. It doesn't look like there's anything too special. It does have non-return valves in it. It was one of the earlier ones, had non-return valves in it, so that you didn't get the hoses completely filled with water if the mouthpiece came out of your mouth underwater. But I don't know if you can zoom in here, Kevin. Can you zoom in right there in front in that spot right there? And can you read that word in between these two metal clips? That says surface on there? Yep. Are you sure? That's right. Did you notice what I did there? A little trick. Yeah, I used to be an amateur magician. This mouthpiece rotates. Watch this, Kevin. You see? If I hold the body still, I can move the mouthpiece down and up. You see, it rotates on the hose. You see that? And big deal, right? Well, when it's in the diving position like this, it worked like a normal regulator. It's certainly a normal two-hose regulator in your mouth. Air comes in, exhaust goes out, other way around. Do it like this, Kevin. Let's get it right here. No, I had it right. Goodness gracious. Don't mix me up. Air comes in, air goes out. Standard. But what happens when you get to the surface? When you get to the surface, you don't want to be breathing air from your tank. You want to breathe air from the air. So what you could do is flip over on your back, floating on your back, and flip this mouthpiece down, and now the air went in through that hole. So you breathe in and out. It was like a super short snorkel. You had to be up like this, obviously, to keep this out of the water. But now when you breathe in and out, air goes in and out. No air comes out of the regulator. It just skips the regulator completely. When you go underwater, flip it back and go diving. You know, I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit goofy, but the point is it's a unique feature. No other regulator had that. There were a couple of regulators that came close, but nobody else had that like that. Let me tell you a couple more things about this pretty neat regulator. A dear, dear friend of mine and a true vintage diver, a famous lady, Zale Perry. Famous actress, stunt lady on Sea Hunt. We've talked about her before. Author. And now she's very, very strong in the Ocean Awareness Society, Environmental Society, still living in northwest United States. She, when she was young, was involved in scuba diving. She trained a lot of people that we've talked about in Vintage Scuba. And she was hired by Northill to use their regulator, this regulator, on a record-setting scuba dive. Again, it wasn't scuba diving, it was lung diving, because she was using the Air-Lung. But in matter of fact, she broke the record at the time. As a lady, she broke the record for deep diving. And it made her quite famous. Well, she was famous, but she made her even more famous. In fact, so famous that her picture I think Kevin's going to put a picture up, her picture of Zale Perry with this regulator at the time of her record dive was featured on the front cover of Sports Illustrated. Yeah, that's pretty famous. Yeah. So anyway, there are a couple more things about the regulator kind of neat. Unfortunately, by about the early 60s, 60, 61, 62, there simply were not enough buyers to continue the profitable manufacture of this regulator. It was extremely well made, so undoubtedly cost extra money, and not enough divers were prepared to pay for that. And more regulators were coming out with some of these great features too. But there you are. I thought I'd share that with you. This regulator is sold and going off to a new happy owner. I hope it's a beautiful regulator, but I wanted to share that with you guys on my Vintage Scuba site, the Northill Air-Lung. Hope you enjoyed that. We're going to talk about some more two-hose regulators. So if you're into vintage diving, into double hose regs, stay tuned. Talk to you again soon. Alec, Peirce, Vintage Scuba.